Hello there, welcome back again. In this video segment I'll review the geometry for lesson 2. Now lesson 2 just deals with geometry creation. In later lessons we'll move into toolpath creation. Now on the screen is the completed geometry for lesson 2. Now x0, y0 is located at the lower left corner of the part. Now to turn the grid on, all you need to do is go into settings, configuration, and then over on the left here, just below screen grid settings, I've got visible grid activated and I've got the size set to 1. So all is looking good here. Now the x-axis runs from left to right and the y-axis runs vertically on the screen and the z-axis is flying out towards you. Now to create the entities that make up this part, I'm going to use create line. We'll also be using chamfer. We'll also check out fillet as well, and we'll be creating arcs and circles. Now this completes this video. Thanks for watching. In the next video. Hey, hello and welcome back. In this video segment we'll explore some of the different methods for constructing lines. Now as you look at the screen, the x-axis is from left to right and the y-axis is laying vertically on the screen and the z-axis is pointing straight at you. Now the origin, our x0, y0, z0, is positioned at the center of the grid. Now what I'm going to do is create a 3x3 square. First two lines using line endpoint and then the second two lines using line parallel. So let's get started. I'm going to move up to create, open up line, and first on the list here, create line endpoint. Now on the screen I'm prompted to specify the first endpoint and the line endpoint ribbon bar shows up. What I'm going to do is move on down, and at the center of the grid as I move close there's the visual cue that allows me to snap to the origin x0, y0. So I'm going to pick that point and then the prompt changes to specify the second endpoint. What I'm going to do is move on up, and on the AutoCursor ribbon bar I'm going to click in the space for X. I'm going to input 0 for X. I'm going to tab over, and for the Y, I'm going to input 3. I'm going to tab over. Now here we are in the Z. Just going to leave the Z at 0 and hit enter. So there's our first line. Let me move the prompt out the way a bit. There's our first line. Over on the right hand side, I'm going to click on the apply button to fix this entity. Once again, we're prompted to specify the first endpoint. What I'm going to do is move on up, and as I get close to the endpoint of this line, there's the visual cue that allows me to snap to the endpoint. I'm going to pick it. Now for the endpoint, this second endpoint, I'm going to move on up, and on the AutoCursor ribbon bar I'm going to click on fast point, and what I'm going to do is type in 3 for the X, comma, and then 3 for the Y, and then hit enter. So we're looking good. Now I'm done here in create line endpoint. I'm going to move on over and click on OK. Now for the other two lines on this square, let's go back into create line, and then this time I'm going to choose create line parallel. Now I'm first prompted to select a line. I'm going to pick this vertical line, and then the prompt changes to select the point to place a parallel line through. I'm going to pick a point over on the right. Now up on the ribbon bar I'm going to click in the space for distance and input 3.0 and then hit enter, and there's our line. Looks good. So over on the right hand side I'm going to click on the apply to fix this guy. Next up we're prompted to select a line. I'm going to pick this line. I'm going to pick a point down here. Now up on the ribbon bar I'm going to open up the drop down and select 3 and then hit enter. So we're done here. Going to click on OK. What I'm going to do now is move on up to the top left, and I'm going to click on undo to get rid of those 4 lines. What I'm going to do now is go back into create line endpoint. Now on the ribbon bar, what I'm going to do is activate multi-line. Now multi-line lets you create multiple lines connected at their endpoints. You can enter a point for the first endpoint of the first line and then a point for the second endpoint of the line. That second point becomes the first endpoint of the next line that you create. So let's get cracking. So multi-line is turned on and I'm prompted to specify the first endpoint. I'm going to pick a point here, and there's our visual cue at the center of the grid there for origin. So I've picked it. Now this time I'm going to move up on the ribbon bar and I'm going to click in the space for length, and I'm going to input 3.0 and then hit enter. Now I'm also going to click on the icon for length to lock that value in. Now next door we have the angle, and what I'm going to do is input 90 for the angle, and there's our line. Looks good. Now note the prompt now specify the second endpoint, and the reason it's doing this is we've got multi-line activated. So for this next line the length is locked in, and now for the angle I'm going to input 0 degrees. There's our second line. Looks good. Next we're going to move on down, and what I'm going to do is length is already set for the angle minus 90 and then hit enter. Now for this last one I'm going to click in angle and input 180, and there we go. Looks good. Going to move on up and click on OK. Let's go back into create line and let's check out create line bisect. Now over on the left of the ribbon bar we've got a couple of options here. One solution which is activated and 4 solutions. I'm going to leave it set to 1 solution. Now I'm prompted to select 2 lines to bisect. I'm going to pick this guy here and then move on up and pick this horizontal line. So as you can see, that line bisects these 2. Now up on the ribbon bar the length is set to 1.5. Let me change it to 2. I'm going to hit apply. Over on the left of the ribbon bar we had 1 solution activated. I'm going to click on 4 solutions. Now I'm going to go over and for this first prompt select 2 lines to bisect. I'll pick this one and this line here, and as you can see we are prompted select which one to keep, and I'm going to pick this guy here. Now let's go over and change the length. I'll change it down to 1 inch. Looks good. Going to click on the green check mark for OK. Let's go back into create line again, and this time number 2 on the list here, create line closest. Now I'm prompted to select line, arc or spline. What I'm going to do is pick this line here, and then I'm going to move on over and pick this line. So this creates a line between 2 entities at the closest intersection. I'm going to move up and do an undo. Let's go back into create line and check out line perpendicular. Now we can use this function to create a line perpendicular to existing entities by selecting an existing line, arc or spline, and then clicking in the graphics window to create an endpoint or pick a point. So what I'm going to do is move on down. I'll pick this line, this horizontal line at the bottom of the screen, and I'll move on up and I'll pick the end point of this angled line here. I'm going to hit on apply. So once again I'm prompted to select line art. I'm going to pick this right vertical line and I'll move over and pick this end point here. I'm going to apply it. I'm going to move on down. I'll pick this line here, and then when prompted to sketch a point, I'll just pick a point on the screen right here. I'm going to move over and click on OK. Next up, we're going to create some tangent lines. So I'm just going to hit the up arrow on my keyboard just to pan up. So we got a couple of circles on the screen here and a couple of points. So let's go into create line and let's check out create line endpoint. Now I've got the length locked in. I'm just going to unlock that. Now if we move over to the right of the screen, you can see the tangent button is activated and I'm prompted to specify the first endpoint. So what I'm going to do is pick this circle here. Now notice I'm about to select it, but there are no visual cues present. So I'm going to pick the circle. I'm just going to slide over and pick the circle here, and there we have our line tangent to those two circles. I'm going to click on apply. Specify the first endpoint. What I'm going to do is pick the circle here. So what you've got to be careful of is you don't pick when one of the visual cues are showing up. And to disable the visual cues, all you need to do is hit the Alt button on your keyboard. I'm going to pick the circle here. I'm just going to slide over to the right. I'm going to pick that circle. So there's a couple of lines there tangent to those two circles. I'm going to click on apply. Now we've got a couple of points on the screen here. Specify the first endpoint. I'm going to pick this point, and that's the visual cue that allows me to snap to this point. I'm going to move on down and pick this circle here. Looks good. Going to hit the apply button. I'm going to go and pick this point here. I'm going to slide over and pick that circle. So we're looking good. Up on the right of the ribbon bar, I'm going to click on OK. And I'm just going to do a few undos. Get rid of some of these lines. Let's go back into create line and let's check out tangent through point. Now up on the ribbon bar, what I've done is I've input 2 and I've got that value locked in. And on the screen I'm prompted to select an arc or spline. So what I'm going to do is over on the right hand side, I'm going to pick this circle here. Now select a tangent point. I'm going to pick a point right here. Then I'm prompted select which line to keep, over on the left or the right. I'm going to pick this guy here. Once again I'm prompted to select an arc or spline. I'm going to move on down here. I'm going to pick this arc. Now I'm prompted to select a tangent point, and what I'm going to do is pick this point here, and as you can see there are no visual cues popping up. Which one do you want to keep? I'm going to pick this guy here. I'm going to apply. Now let's do another one. Select an arc or spline. I'll pick the circle here. I'm prompted to select a tangent point, and what I'm going to do, there's that visual cue for quadrant. I'm going to pick it. Which one do you want to keep? I'm going to pick this guy over on the left here. Going to move on up and click on OK. Now, and that finishes up our excursion of creating lines. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll be talking with you soon. Hello and welcome. In this video segment I'll start to create the geometry for lesson 2. Now on the screen is the completed geometry for lesson 2. In a moment I'll start a new file and create the geometry from scratch. Now just a reminder, x0, y0 is the lower left corner That's the center of this grid. So let's get started and create a new file. So I'm going to move up to the top left of the screen, open up File, and number 1 on the list here, going to click on New. Looking good. Now I'm not using the toolpath manager, so in a moment I'm going to close this up. Now it's set to mill default. Now if we need to change it, we can do that very easily. Just click on the plus sign, move into Files, and now at the very top, Machine Toolpath Copy, going to click on Replace, and what I'm looking for is the generic Hass 4-axis mill. There it is. Going to click on OK. Click on OK, that green check mark at the bottom, and as you can see it's changed to generic Hass 4-axis. Looking good. Now we're not creating any toolpaths for this particular part, so what I'm going to do is turn off the toolpaths manager over on the left here, so that we can go up into View and click on Toggle Toolpaths Manager, and we'll click on View again, and I'm going to click on Toggles the Solids Manager as well. So looking good, looking good. So to kick off, we're going to create some lines. So what I'm going to do is move into Create Line, and then number 1 on the list here, Create Line Endpoint. Now I'm prompted to begin with to specify the first endpoint, and what I'm going to do is we're going to create this line. We're going to start at X0, Y0, the center of the grid. So moving up to the left on the AutoCursor ribbon bar, I'm going to click in the X value there and type in 0, hit the tab, and I'm transported over to the Y. Going to pump in 0 for that. Going to hit the tab again and then tab one more time. So there's the start point of this line. Now we're prompted to specify the second endpoint, and once again what I'm going to do is click in the X value up here, and we're going vertical. That's the first line that we're putting on, and the X value is going to be 0. Now I've just tabbed over and we are in the Y, and the Y is going to be 3. Going to tab again and then tab one more time. So look, there's our first line. What I'm going to do is click on Display Fit. Let's do an unzoom 0.8, so just slid over to the right there just to shrink it down, and then what I'm going to do is hit the right arrow key on my keyboard just to pan over a touch. Looks good, looks good. Next up, our next line, so specify the first endpoint. So what I'm going to do is move over, and at the top of this vertical line here, the visual cue for endpoint has just shown up. Going to click on that point. The prompt changes to specify the second endpoint. So what I'm going to do is move on up, click in the X value. Now the endpoint of this next guy is 3 in the X. Going to hit the tab, and the Y is 3 as well. Going to hit the tab and the tab one more time. So we're looking good. Going to click on the Apply button over here. There we go. Now once again, specify the first endpoint. So what I'm going to do is move on up and click on that endpoint. There's the visual cue. Got it. Now prompt, specify the second endpoint. Going to click up in the X space and going to type in 3 for the X value. Going to hit the tab, and for the Y, big fat 0. Going to hit the tab again and 0 once again. So we're looking good. Going to click on the Apply button. And for our last line, over in the bottom right corner here, going to click on the endpoint of that line. There's that visual cue that denotes we're going to snap to the endpoint. Got it. And now to satisfy this prompt, specify the second endpoint. Going to click in the X value. Going to pump in 0, and then for the Y, another 0. Going to hit the tab, and we are looking good. Going to click on the Apply button on the ribbon bar. So we're looking good. We're done here. Going to click on OK. So there's our first 4 lines. Next up, going to move up to the top left of the screen. Going to click on the Fit icon, and then just slide over to the right, and what I'm going to do is unzoom 0.8. So we're looking good so far. Now next up we've got some chamfers on the top corners of the part. Now these chamfers are 1/4 by 45 degrees. So let's move into create, chamfer. I'm going to pick chamfer entities. Now let's check out the ribbon bar. So over on here, distance 1, we've got it set to 0.25, so that's exactly what I'm after. If I just tab over and I'm going to open up the style, so we've got 1 distance, 2 distance, distance and angle, and width. So 1 distance is exactly what we want. And just over on the right here, the trim is activated, so everything's looking good on the chamfer ribbon bar. Now let's move on down to the graphics area, and we're prompted to select line or arc. So what I'm going to do is pick this horizontal line at the top and then just slide over to the left. And as you can see, we're getting a preview of that chamfer, and I'm going to hit that left vertical line, so looking good. Now up on the ribbon bar, I'm going to click on the apply button to lock that guy in, and now for the last chamfer, what I'm going to do is pick this line and then just slide over to the right, and then once again you can see we're getting that preview of the chamfer. So I'm going to click on that right vertical line. Everything is looking good, so I'm going to apply and then click on OK. So everything is looking good. Now next up we've got a couple of 1/4 inch fillets to put down on the lower part. So let's get cracking. I'm going to move into create, slide on down, open up fillet, and I'm going to pick fillet entities. So let's check out the fillet ribbon bar. So the radius, the default here is 0.25, and it's exactly what I want. I'm going to hit the tab and we're transported over to the style, and if I open up the style, we've got normal, inverse, circle, or clearance. So I'm sticking with normal. That's exactly what we're after. And as you can see over on the right here, we've got the trim activated. So let's move on down to the graphic screen, and to satisfy this prompt, fillet, select an entity. First up, I'm going to pick this vertical line on the left, just going to slide on down and pick this horizontal line. So there's our first fillet. I'm going to move on up and click on the apply button, and then next up I'm going to click this horizontal line, just slide over to the right and pick this guy. We are looking good. Going to click on OK. Now that completes this video. Thanks for watching. More geometry to come in the Hello and welcome back once again. In this video segment I'll continue creating the geometry for lesson 2. Now to kick off, I'll create the 4.125 radius arcs and then the 1 inch diameter circle at the center of the part. So let's get started with the geometry. So first up, I'm going to move into create, open up arc, and then what we're after is arc polar. There we go. I'm going to click on arc polar. Now over on the ribbon bar, it's opened up with all our different values there, and on the screen we're prompted to enter the center point. So that's the first thing I'm going to do. So moving up over to the left, I'm going to click in the X value. Now I'm going to enter a value of 0.5 for the X. I'm going to hit the tab button. Now for the Y, I'm going to input 2.5 and then hit the tab key again and then the tab key one more time. Now as you can see, the prompt on the screen has changed and it's indicating sketch the initial angle. So what I'm going to do is move on just to the right here. Now you can see the start angle. I'm going to click in the start angle box there and I'm going to input a value of 0. Going to hit the tab button and we're transported over to the end angle. Now for the end angle I'm going to input 180 and then hit enter. Now I'm going to slide on back over to the left. Now for the radius, going to click in here, and the radius of this arc is 0.125, and I'm going to hit enter. So there's our first arc. Looks good. So what I'm going to do is over on the right, going to click on the apply button on the ribbon bar, and that's it, locked in. Looks good. Now on to arc number 2. Now as you can see on the screen, we're prompted to enter the center point, so let's get that sorted out. So I'm going to move on up, click in the X box here, and then what I'm going to do is put in 0.5, hit the tab button, and we're transported over to the Y, and for the Y 0.5, going to hit the tab button and the tab button once again. So we're prompted to sketch the initial angle. So on the ribbon bar, what I'm going to do is click in the start angle. Now for this guy, the start angle is going to be 180. I'm going to hit the tab button, and then for the end angle, that's 0. I'm going to hit enter. Now let's just move over to the left. Now for the radius, I'm going to input 0.125 and then hit enter, and there's our arc down below. Looks good. Gonna hit the apply button to lock it in. So we're looking great. Now on to arc number 3. So to satisfy this prompt, enter the center point. What I'm going to do is move on up to the left, and for the X 2.5, for the X value, going to hit the tab, and we're transported over to the Y. Now for the Y, same deal, 2.5, going to hit tab, and then for the Z, that's staying as is at 0, and then tab one more time. Once again, I'm prompted for the initial angle, and what I'm going to do now is click in the space here for start angle, and I'm going to input 0. Going to hit the tab button, and we're transported over to the right, and for the end angle I'm going to put in 180 and then hit enter. Now it's going to slide over to the left. Now for the radius, what I'm going to do is let's open up this drop down and click on 125, 0.125. Going to hit the enter, and there's our third arc. Looks good. Going to hit the apply button. Now on to our fourth arc. So once again, enter the center point. Going to move up to the left, click in the X value here, and the X value is 2.5. Going to hit the tab, and for the Y 0.5. Going to hit the tab one more time. Z's going to stay as is at 0, and I'm going to hit the tab button once again, and the prompt changes on the screen. Sketch the initial angle. So once again, going to click in initial angle. Now the start angle for this guy is 180. Going to hit the tab, and the end angle for this guy is 0. Going to hit enter. Now for the radius, just going to slide over to the left here, open up that drop down, pick 125 and hit the enter, and there it is. Going to hit the apply and click on OK. We've finished with our arcs. So all is looking good. Welcome back again. In this video segment I'll finish creating the geometry for lesson 2. The 4 lines that are tangent to the 4 arcs will be created. So let's get started with the geometry. So first up, going to move into create line, and then number 1 on the list here, create line endpoint. So let's check out the line endpoint ribbon bar. Now over on the right hand side you'll notice that tangent is activated. Now the tangent button, when it's activated, lets you create lines that are tangent to arcs and splines. So let's get moving. Now specify the first endpoint. What I'm going to do is move on over, and as I get close to the arc, you can see the visual cue for the endpoint of that arc has just popped up. So what I'm going to do is pick that point. Now I'm prompted to specify the second endpoint, so what I'm going to do is travel on down below. Now as you can see, as I get to the endpoint of that arc, that visual cue shows up. So what I'm going to do is pick this point. So there's our first line. I'm going to click on the apply button on the line ribbon bar. So it looks good. Now next up for the second line. Now before we do that, let's just talk about a few things. When creating the lines, we snap to the endpoints of the arcs. In this example, this also happens to be the tangency points. So when you need to create lines that are tangent to arcs or circles, and the tangency point is not the endpoint of the arc, what you can do is hold down the Alt key to disable the AutoCursor, and at the same time pick the arc in the approximate tangency position. Now for the creation of these 4 tangent lines, you can employ either method. Snap to the endpoints or disable the AutoCursor to explicitly use tangency. Now on the screen we're prompted to specify the first endpoint. Now what happens is when I move over, there's that visual cue that shows up. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit the Alt key and hold it down, and as you can see, as I move over there, that visual cue is not showing up. It's been deactivated. So what I'm going to do is just pick that arc there. Now when prompted to specify the second endpoint, I'm going to move on down. Now I've taken my finger off the Alt key, and now what's happening is that visual cue for endpoint is showing up. I'm going to press the Alt key down to disable it, and what I'm going to do is go and pick the arc there. So we've got our line tangent to those 2 arcs. So it's looking good. Going to move on up and click on the apply button. Now next up we're going to move over to the right and let's put these lines in. So look, once again I'm going to hold the Alt key down. I'm going to pick this arc. I'm still holding it down. Going to move on down, and I'm going to pick the arc over here. Looking good. Going to hit the apply button, and now for this last line, once again I'm going to hold the Alt button down. Going to pick that arc, going to slide on down, still got my finger on the Alt button, and pick that arc. So it is looking good. Now I'm going to hit the apply button. So everything is looking good. Let's click on the OK button. Now next up I'm going to save this file. I'm going to click on File, Save As, and I've got the name there, Mill Lesson 2. I'm going to click on the Save button. Now it comes back, I've already got one there. Do you want to replace it? I'm going to say yes. Now that completes this video. Thanks so much for